Welcome back to Barefoot Bible. I am your host, David Wright. We're continuing our Judges series today with a generation that did not know the Lord, teaching lessons from Judges chapter 2, verses 8 through 12. Now, Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died when he was 110 years old. Verse 9, and they buried him within the border of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres in the mountains of Ephraim on the north side of Mount Gaash. So we learned a little bit here about the context of Judges as we move forward into chapter 2, with some repetition from the end of the book of Joshua, that we're dealing in Judges with a third generation. The first being essentially the generation that left Exodus. So I've nicknamed it the Exodus generation. And you can find record of that, Numbers chapter 14, verse 22, and also 29 and 30. It was a group that was liberated under Moses' leadership. They witnessed God's miraculous signs and wonders. However, when they got to the promised land and God sent them out to spy out the land, due to their lack of faith, God declared that this generation would perish in the wilderness. So that's what happened with the first generation out of Egypt, the Exodus generation. There's just a couple exceptions who also survived. It was Joshua and Caleb. The second generation is the Promised Land generation. And it emerged 40 years after their wilderness wandering in the desert. Numbers 14:31, now led by the leadership of Joshua, they boldly took control of the promised land. Joshua chapter 1, verse 11. And here in Judges, chapter 2, we reach the conclusion of Joshua's leadership as is described in verses 8 and 9. All right. Along with Judges 2, verse 10, when all that generation had been gathered to their fathers, another generation arose after them who did not know the Lord, nor the work which he had done in Israel. So now we arrive at the third generation, not the Exodus generation, not the promised land, but we'll call this the Judges generation. After Exodus, after the promised land, this generation did not know the Lord. Judges chapter 2, verse 10. The grandchildren of those who had experienced the Exodus had heard some of the stories about those miracles, about the crossing of the Red Sea, and then following Joshua, their parents had experienced the fall of Jericho's walls as they conquered the promised land. So this third generation lacked a direct personal faith in Jehovah, and as we will see, they instead chose to worship the Canaanite gods surrounding them. Let's move on to verse 11 and 12. Then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served the Baals, was the chief Canaanite god, verse 12. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them. And they bowed down to them, not the people, but to the gods. And they provoked the Lord, all caps, to anger. So the judges' generation did not know the Lord. They served the Canaanite god Baal. They turned away from their true living God. And this situation underscores how quickly a nation can drift from their faith. Christians everywhere warn that it may only take one generation for a country to abandon its reverence for God. In just a single generation, a nation that once honored him can swiftly forget his existence. And that's the lesson that we ought to learn from Judges chapter 2. As we move forward, next week we'll continue the Judges series with bowing to Baal. And that is actually a carving of the god Baal, who is to the Canaanites was the god of thunder, god of storms, actually. And so we'll be looking at Judges chapter 2, verses 13 through 15. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope it was informative to you, and you'll continue to tune in next week for Bowing to Baal as we continue to learn from this important Old Testament book. God bless.